This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Since the UK general election last year, there's been a lot of speculation about bringing back European free movement for under 30s. This all began last summer, when the EU issued a list of demands it wanted the UK to fulfil as part of Labour's reset of UK-EU relations post-Brexit, which included a youth mobility deal. While Labour leader Keir Starmer had previously ruled out a return to EU free movement, a youth mobility deal now appears a lot more likely, with the media reporting last week that Brussels is insisting on negotiating a youth experience scheme with the UK at a key summit on the 19th of May. So, in this video, we'll look at the idea of a UK-EU youth mobility scheme, how popular it is in the UK, and why it now looks considerably more likely. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. As you'll know if you've watched our previous videos, the UK's exit from the European Union in 2020 caused a lot of complications for people and businesses, including the introduction of border controls, lengthy goods checks, and new visa rules for travelling to Europe. This wasn't especially popular with the British public, a majority, 55%, of whom now believe the UK was wrong to leave the EU. This sentiment is far higher among younger people, with a YouGov survey from January showing that 75% of 18 to 24-year-olds think that the UK was wrong to leave, along with 67% of 25 to 49-year-olds. This is largely why, during the 2024 election campaign, the Labour Party made a post-Brexit reset of relations with the EU one of its key manifesto pledges, promising a UK-EU security pact and new trade agreements. However, Labour specifically ruled out returning to the EU single market, customs union and free movement. After Labour came into office, the EU issued a list of demands they wanted the UK to agree to as part of this reset, including on two contentious issues: access to the UK's fishing waters, which British officials are reportedly willing to grant in a multi-year deal with freeze quotas, and free movement for young people, whereby the UK would rejoin the Erasmus student exchange scheme and young Europeans would be allowed to work and study in the UK and vice versa for several years. But in the first few months after the election, Starmer repeatedly denied that the UK would return to free movement, and in October explicitly ruled out a youth mobility scheme, reportedly over concerns about the impact on migration figures and the potential backlash from letting tens of thousands of European students and trainees come to the UK every year, as happened before Brexit. Despite this, the British public are actually generally in favour of a youth mobility scheme for under 30s. A majority, 54%, support a 4-year scheme, with this rising to 66% for a 2-year scheme. Still, Labour have been wary of agreeing to it, as it would arguably breach their manifesto statement that there will be no return to freedom of movement. Opposition figures like Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage have seized on this, with Badenoch arguing that Starmer is capitulating to the EU and that a youth mobility scheme would become another avenue which people might use to game the system. Similarly, Farage has argued that youth mobility is completely against what the Brexit vote demanded. Interestingly, however, polling by Best for Britain shows that in every single UK constituency, including Badenoch's North West Essex and Farage's Clacton, support for a youth mobility deal outweighs opposition. While in Clacton there's a notable drop in the margin of support for a 4-year scheme, 7 points, compared to a 2-year one, 32 points, when we zoom out, we see that across all English constituencies where Reform came first or second at the general election, Clacton is the most opposed to a youth mobility scheme, with most other Reform voting constituencies registering a margin of support in the 20s or 30s. So, in the past couple of months, Starmer has apparently warmed to the idea, with the media reporting in February that he was considering agreeing to a youth mobility scheme for up to 3 years per person. MPs and pro-Remain campaign groups have also added pressure, with around 70 Labour MPs and peers sending a letter last week to the UK's chief EU negotiator, Nick Thomas-Symonds, calling for a time-limited and capped youth visa scheme. Now, there's a few reasons why a youth mobility scheme is looking more likely. First is the upcoming UK-EU summit on the 19th of May. Second, the public popularity of the scheme. And third, the government's immigration statistics. The main reason there's more hype about a scheme now is because of an upcoming summit between UK and EU officials on the 19th of May. This is a landmark summit, nearly 9 years after the UK voted to leave the EU in June 2016, and is expected to lead to an agreement to start serious talks on several important issues. Last week, the Financial Times reported that British officials expect Starmer to commit to talks on a youth mobility scheme, now rebranded as a youth experience scheme, as well as on energy cooperation, fisheries, students, and removing barriers to trade in food products. Last week, after a quote, brilliant meeting between Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Downing Street said both sides were working to deliver as ambitious a package as possible. Next up is the political rationale. Despite contravening Labour's manifesto pledge, and despite arguments by opposition MPs that it could increase the risk that Europeans try to move illegally to the UK, as we showed before, there's significant cross-party support for a youth mobility scheme. The fact that even reform voting constituencies are largely in favour of a deal suggests that fears over its interaction with immigration are misplaced, and most people generally just like the idea of young people having better opportunities. In fact, the government's drive to reduce net migration also makes a youth mobility scheme look more likely, with Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who was most opposed to a deal in Starmer's cabinet because of how the numbers could inflate migration figures, has now said she'd be open to a youth mobility scheme on a one-in, one-out basis, and has reportedly floated a ban on anyone entering the UK under the scheme from ever claiming asylum, presumably as a deterrent for gaming the system. The government is also planning to release a white paper setting out Labour's plans to reduce net migration ahead of the May 19th summit, with one official telling the FT, if we're going to be saying some warm things about youth mobility at the summit, it's important we reassure the public that we are bringing migration down. Ultimately, this looks promising for under-30s, assuming some kind of EU-UK youth mobility deal is finalised in the coming months and years. The details of how the scheme would actually work and who will be eligible won't become clear until serious talks are underway, but it does look like a free movement deal for young people is now very much on the table. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you. Luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares this same commitment. Their thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and ultimately become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra, then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, or you can click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.